Good morning everyone and welcome to the Council meeting of Tuesday the 10th of June 2025. In terms of health and safety, if the alarm sounds, please make your way to the nearest emergency exit. The assembly point is further down Devonport Road. Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and the video will be publicly available on YouTube. Members, could you please speak clearly into your microphones and only one speaker at a time for clarity, and please make sure your mobile phones are off. We'll start off today by handing over to Hemi and seeing if he could give us an opening karakia, please.
Mōrena tātou, kia noi tātou. Tui runga, tui raro, tui roto, tui waho, tui te here tangata karongo te awa karongo te pō, nau mai te ihi te wē te mana te tapu, pau ki roto ki a mātou mō tēnei rā, ko ia rā e rongo whakiriraki ki runga, turu whakamaua ki a tīna. Haumi e hui e.
Thank you, Councillor Rolleston, for that opening karakia. Apologies, I believe we've got a full complement. Thank you, so no apologies. We don't have any public forum today, and I'm not aware of any late items unless anyone's got anything. I do note there was a couple of attachments to do with 11.2 that were issued yesterday, so they are there as part of that's section 4 of 11.2. There's risk assessments and the RAS external documentation. Confidential business to be transferred into the open. Is there any to be transferred? No, thank you. And at this stage, we will run the meeting in the order of business as per the agenda, but there may be times that we move outside that if required. Now I'd just like to confirm the minutes. So the first one is minutes of the council meeting held on the 28th of April 2025. And I ask for a mover and seconder that the minutes of the council meeting held on 28th of April 2025 be confirmed as a true and correct record. We've got a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Baker, thank you. Got a seconder. Councillor Taylor, thank you. All those in favour? Those against? Council meeting of the 8th of May 2025, this is on page 30. And I ask if we've got a mover and seconder to confirm that that is a true and correct record. Councillor Taylor, Councillor Roseboom, thank you. Any corrections? No. If there's no corrections, all those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Thank you. The last minutes is of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 9th of May 2025. This is on page 36, and I ask for a mover and seconder that these minutes of the extraordinary council meeting of 9th of May 2025 be confirmed as a true and correct record. All those, Councillor Schuler, Councillor Roseboom, thank you. All those in favour? Those against? That is carried, thank you. Next item of business is declarations of conflict of interest. Just asking if any members have any conflicts of interest to any of the agenda items today. Okay, no conflicts. Obviously, if you become aware of a conflict during the meeting, please let me know and we can record that. There's no deputations, presentations or petitions. Therefore, we'll move on to item 10, which is recommendations from other committees. We have a couple of recommendations here. The first one is, this is page 43. Okay, thank you, Councillor Kurak. I've got a second, Councillor Schuler, thank you. So this is appointing Councillor Rolleston onto Potiarau Omawao. I butchered that, but that, and obviously that was appointing was going to be the Te Awanui ward candidate councillor, and obviously with Councillor Rolleston being elected last month, that is now being made the deputy chair. Is there any discussion on that? Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I was happy to move it. I was standing in for the Te Awanui ward position there, and it was a pleasure to attend those meetings, which are quite interesting. And given the public value of Moa to the community, it was certainly a privilege to be there. But I think Hemi is going to be a great asset to that committee, given his knowledge, and you walk up every day, don't you, Hemi?
Most days.
Yeah. And so you certainly understand the issues there. So, yep, it's a pleasure in moving these. And best wishes.
Thank you. Any other discussion? If there's no other discussion, we have some recommendations there. And that's around appointing Hemi to the chair as well as receiving the report. We've had a chance to read the recommendations, I therefore ask all those in favour, those against. That is abstain. Yep. That is carried. Thank you, and I look forward to Hemi doing a fantastic job on that. The second recommendation is from Waiari Kaitiaki Advisory Group. This is again appointment of a co-chair, being Councillor Hautapu Baker is the recommendation. And we just put the Councillor, Deputy Mayor Schooler, thank you. We've got a seconder, Councillor Rolleston, thank you. Is there any discussion? No. All right. If there's no discussion, again, this has come as a recommendation from the joint committee, so it's just for us to approve, and I ask all those in favour. Those against? Do you want to abstain, Councillor Baker? Thank you. That is carried. Thank you very much. So now we move on to 11.1. We're on page 45 of the agenda, and this is to do with receiving the status updates on actions from prior council meetings, noting that it's a recurring report, and notes any requested improvements to this report, and notes that attachment 2 can be transferred to the open when the report is generated. The action is no longer confidential, so we'll look at that later in the meeting. Obviously there's a number there of in progress or pending, and there is also a number of closed. So I'd just like to, at this stage, only discuss those that are closed, and the reason for that is we will not see these again. If they're closed, they'll drop off this action. So we just want to make sure that everything on that list that is closed has been satisfactorily dealt with to elected members' satisfaction, and I'm happy to look at any of those things, or if there's any corrections to any of the others that the action required doesn't maybe meet what elected members thought was being done on those things. Yep, Councillor Taylor.
This is about process, just looking, for example, at item 11.1, which is some information that was put into Stella. It would be very useful if we could actually have the Stella pathway put into here, just so we can find it, because it's a bit of a jungle out there.
Yeah. No, that's a good pick up. Thanks to you, Councillor Taylor. There's been a few things that I've seen in Stella and never been able to find the document, so that's a good reminder.
Can I just add also on a process point, and I don't know, my comments have all have the comment actually has disappeared, but where the minutes say that's the action, can we just copy that wording into the action schedule? Sometimes when it goes into the action schedule, the wording goes a little bit differently, but if it's been minuted as that, that's what should be and it's easier. Thank you. And I just want to comment to say thank you very much. The action schedules to me are fantastic. It's a very good reflection on what's happening and what's going to happen, and I think it's very, and it's recognising there's an awful lot that is not always resolved by the next meeting, and it's really important that we as a governing group are making sure we're aware of actions that are pending and making sure we are aware of them until they are closed. So thank you very much for adding it.
Yeah, thank you. So obviously, something like 11.1, I agree with Councillor Taylor, because while I've seen that, I haven't found the link. So on the assumption that it is there and we're satisfied, we'll consider all those closed. All of those from my perspective, I'm comfortable with, but is there?
I can send out an email if you like to councillors to still a pathway for that particular one.
Yeah, there's a couple. I think there's one more as well. That would be great.
So just from my perspective, I would still like to have a closed action schedule that we can always access.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will just be once these closed go into an action schedule, we know that's somewhere, and that'll be in Stella, maybe in its own folder, just to say closed actions. And maybe do we need it for each committee?
I think
We probably do.
We could have one, but
folders.
you could just have one file with the different committees. I think you want to go to just as a sorting thing.
No, I wouldn't. I would have them as 3 documents. Do we need 3 folders in Stella? We probably do, because you go into delivery and then you want to be able to go into the closed actions.
Yeah. Councillor Crowther.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I had one point there, and I do want to say it's fantastic, and thank you to Deputy Mayor for asking for this and to the staff for making it work so well. The one I had was on 3rd of March, 11.6, the closed one. It covers, it's for Marine Park reclassification, it covers, under the action required, councillors to receive background correspondence, etc. But it doesn't cover the other part of that, which was the public to receive it. So Marty, as Chief Executive, had said that he saw no reason that anything needed to be held back from the public, and we've had, some of us at least, I think if not all of us, have had repeated requests from members of the public, especially from Neil Pollett, who came in and spoke on that issue, and he's saying that there's still information. In fact, I've confirmed there is some information I have that he doesn't have, and there's other information he said he's asked for and has not been able to obtain. So it would be nice before it's closed to find a spot for either to close off the part for councillors to get information and open another action for the public, or to put this as in progress until we're satisfied that everything has been made public, as the Chief Executive had said or indicated he would do. And I would add on that even our council can't get information for me from University of Waikato. So it does seem like a very fraught issue. We need to be able to see some of this stuff. And I don't think it's good enough that the university holds stuff back from us when we're giving them a bit of a bargain deal.
Councillor Kurak.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Crowther around the provision of information, and there does seem to be a bit of a roadblock when it comes to Neil Pollitt's request. He was instrumental in the initial consultation process to engage many in the community around that site and why it's so precious. But in the conclusion through that process was, it didn't take into account a lot of that public opposition, from my understanding. And so you can understand why he's still on the case. And if there's new information that arises, and I mentioned that site visit that a few elected members attended there, and I mentioned that, we had that slideshow and it showed a pipe running from the site where they want to build the new facility right out into the main harbour, what do you call it, channel, thank you, which was quite different to what I'd historically heard, and my understanding was that we're going to get the access to water straight out in front of that building. So it's a major change in terms of the proposal, but he has come across a roadblock, and I certainly would like this organisation to be a bit more allowing of the request and provide that information, which I don't think is confidential. But it is a University of Waikato document, so I suggested that he contact the university and make a request under the Official Information Act, because it's owned by the uni. But if this organisation can be of assistance and get the document and check with the organisation, the University of Waikato, to see if it would allow that distribution, I'd be thrilled, because it's about transparency. But they're not, sorry?
Just through the chair, our staff have been trying for weeks to get hold of that information. The university aren't releasing it.
Well, I think that we're getting out of our lane. Obviously, what a leasee does on their property is kind of up to them. And if they were going to put a said pipe in, they would have to go for consent, and I'm guessing that would probably be through the regional council. So it would all be made public at that point. But I'm not sure we're in the business of forcing a developer to release concept plans, for example, which is effectively the same thing. When there will be a moment when it becomes in the public, and that's probably when they go for resource consent. So, I think there's certain information. If it's council information, that's fine. But we're not in the business of controlling a entity outside of the council. So that's probably a information request, between a member of the public and the University of Waikato, not anything to do with council's business. So, but if there's council information, and obviously that status item is still pending because it hasn't been closed. So there's still additional information that is required, and we'll support gathering that. Yeah, Councillor Crowther.
I guess I'm confused in terms of there's two issues here. One is the public information. The other one is for elected members to be able to have visibility over something which we're told in the previous meeting that it wasn't, that the agreement hasn't been signed. So we've got a preliminary agreement or whatever it's called, but we haven't got the final thing signed. Part of the conditions, what the university said when I asked them about it, was that we would be a partner and we would be party to the information. It just seems, putting aside the public, it seems wrong that the elected members can't get to see it, particularly because in my case I had another council engagement that morning, didn't know that they were going to present something new. It just seems bizarre to me. It's a funny, I don't think it's a matter of trying to get information inappropriately. It's saying we are working together to see if it's going to be appropriate to develop it as they want. Nothing has been signed, is my understanding.
Do you want to answer?
Just for clarity in terms of, and I, forgive me, I can't remember the exact legal terms of what is agreed and the various correspondence, but there's an agreement that's to move forward, but it does have certain caveats that need to be achieved as part of that in terms of designing and consent and so forth before the final signing of any lease agreement. Bear me if I haven't got the terminology exactly correct.
Agreement to lease.
Yeah, that's right. So, but we can confirm what's been released and what hasn't been released. Yeah.
Any other discussion around the those action items? Okay, if that's the case, just put the recommendation up. Councillor Taylor, thank you, will move that. Councillor Deputy Mayor Schooler will second, thank you. Is there any further discussion? Just thank you, staff, for your work. I think this is good to make sure we're dealing with everything that comes up. All those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Thank you very much. We move on to 11.2, which is the Ratepayer Assistance Scheme, page 52. As I mentioned earlier, just note there are a couple of additional items to supplement this report. Did Paul, Fraser, wish to discuss anything, or?
Just while Fraser's coming up, so this is the Ratepayer Assistance Scheme report. As part of the annual plan process, there was a placeholder budget included for $500,000, subject to this paper coming to council. It seeks approval for that $500,000 to form part of, in the event that the scheme has stood up, equity in the Ratepayer Assistance Scheme. Ratepayer Assistance Scheme has three fundamental components, rates postponement being one, development contribution deferrals being another, and property improvement loans being the third. There's no requirement for council to adopt or pick up all of or any of those schemes. It's discretionary. So the piece of work that this funding is seeking to take forward is to confirm the entity and work on the legislation effectively to actually enable the scheme to come into place. It would require further consultation in the event that it's a form of CCO, council controlled organisation, so that would still require some further consultation if the scheme progressed to that point. And Fraser, if you've got anything else to add.
Very little to add to what you've put in there. I would just note that since we've had a presentation, the same presentation's been given to a number of other councils, and a number of them are looking to put reports up, and there's still further presentations happening going forward. Auckland have already passed a resolution similar to what you're looking at today, so they've actually already agreed to that. And there's also been some money put in through ECA to support it as well. So that's they're particularly interested in the property improvement loan part. Just wanted to this isn't the kind of final decision. This is a decision in terms of putting in more money to kind of start setting up the organisation. There would be another decision that would be made at a future date, actually for the final investment in terms of once it was actually set up. So by that point, we would expect things like the legislation and things like that to have all been passed. So we would have when you're making that call, you will have a much better understanding of exactly what is available. The further decision Paul has already referred to is that if you didn't like particularly part of one of those schemes, you don't have to offer that to your ratepayers.
And then finally, of course, the individual ratepayers have got a choice of whether they take up any of these schemes or not. So it comes down to their individual choice. So yeah, the steps, although we're passing the resolution today, we won't actually need to pay this amount out till we get further down the legislative track. So we'll understand again a bit better, and also the full $2.5 million from all the other councils needs to be committed as well. So you're effectively only going to have to pay this money out once there's further commitments and processes happen. I also want to make an apology. There is another late attachment coming through. We had intended to also give you the 2023 paper, so that should be available in Stella shortly.
Apologies, that was me that missed the wrong paper, so we'll get that sent.
Sorry, that was all.
Councillor Baker.
Morena tātou. Yeah, cool. Seems like a really cool kaupapa. Just a random question. Obviously, this helps people who own homes or properties. Have we, or has anyone done some work on any potential long-term negative impacts this will have on renters or vulnerable people in communities, if at all?
No, I don't believe that there has been any work done in relation to this. I'm not sure. I can't immediately see any direct implication. One thing that kind of sticks in my head as something that could happen in the future is the intention is that this entity would make a profit and pay dividends, and it would be up to a council at that point to determine what they wanted to do with those dividends. So that could be a thing where the scheme does actually come back and have a community impact. But that's just a kind of thought off the top of my head.
Councillor Correct.
Just following on from Councillor Baker's question, and what came to my mind immediately was the potential for this to incentivise residential property, investment. And as we've seen over the years, that's been growing, and so not necessarily a positive thing, because the demand of residential investors, they're in a position where they're in the room bidding against first home buyers, which is often the target sort of market for that. So to me, that's a negative if it impacts on that. But thinking about whether they actually can apply through this to basically have that the rates or the operating cost put into debt, and we're talking about cheap money here, what criteria will there be in terms of the application? So yeah, is there criteria around trying to limit it to the market that needs it most, rather than, say, property speculators?
At this stage, none of those rules have been set, so I can't answer with any honesty your question. I would suggest that if we do this investment, we will then have some kind of say around the table in terms of how the next steps get put together and the organisation is put together. So there may be some opportunity to have some influence on that, but I don't know what that will be. At the end of the day, it will be up to that organisation to set what the criteria are.
If I just add to Fraser's comment, I think that will also potentially be different depending on what the actual the element of the scheme it's looking at. So rates postponement will be treated differently to deferral of development contributions, and will be treated differently to property improvement loans in terms of the criteria. But as Fraser says, that will be part of the next phase in terms of the development, in terms of the criteria that's set. But it's I don't think it would be. It's not intended to help, speculative investment or anything like that.
Councillor.
On that, I think it is important for such considerations to be actually considered at an early stage, like we are now, in terms of some of those implications, because at the end of the day, we don't want any consequences which we didn't anticipate to occur and for those consequences to be quite negative. And if we wanted to defer a decision to think about some of the more deeper issues that such a scheme may result in, in terms of timing, when would they like to have councils confirm the continuation of this work? What is the rush? Because as I understand, and this is the question, sorry, there doesn't seem to be any support by central government on this at this stage, So where is that at? I know they have to, it needs to go before Cabinet and then needs to lead to legislation to provide for it. And why haven't they gone down that track? This has been talked about for some time. Is there a bit of political resistance from central government around and potentially around the negative consequences, causing them not to actually put a stake in the ground and say, yes, we support this and the legislation will happen?
Through the chair, if I could just comment on that, because I was involved with the steering group with this in terms of presenting to the previous government, and it was fundamentally delayed at that point because of simply lack of capacity to actually get onto any legislative agenda. The Minister has now confirmed that is now available from August, which is why the time frame is being able to actually being pushed now to actually get some work done through Department of Internal Affairs to be able to actually progress the scheme, which hasn't been the case to date.
In terms of time frame, when is it likely that the government will be in a position that they're ready to go with this? I'm thinking in time frame, why it's so urgent for us to do our bit when the government seems to be a bit tardy.
Look, it's very hard for me to comment any more than say that the Minister has expressed and has asked his officials to actually look at this in August. How long that process takes and what that looks like is difficult to comment on their process yet.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions. One on the unknown criteria. Is it envisaged that, as well as being able to opt in and out of certain components of the scheme, whether individual councils will be able to adopt their own criteria for the application of that, or would that be done by the combined body, so each local authority would have the same criteria? That's the first question, then got a supplementary if I may.
As I say, the rules haven't been set at this stage, but I would be surprised at the end of the day if it was up to each council to decide on the rules for the individual one. Each council will be able to decide, so for example, we could decide not to offer pills as part of the thing, but once we had made that suggestion, I would suggest that the likelihood is that it will be up to the organisation's rules that they've set whether for to individuals to then take that up.
And supplementary question relates to a different kind of tenure. So in Papamoa and other parts of the country, there's a little bit of a trend in the retirement space for leasehold land where the ratepayer is the person who has brought the building onto the site or built the building, and they of course pay rent to the landlord, and that there's Golden Sands Lifestyle Village and another one being constructed right now off Emerald Jaws Drive in Papamoa, both owned by Blue Haven. In terms of the criteria, yeah, I mean, that would be a hard one. I mean, you wouldn't. The landowner is a different person. So, has there been any talk or discussion around that sort of model in terms of assistance?
No, there hasn't, but I'd be happy to, if you could give me a couple of the examples, then we could actually flow those through. And I guess that's one of the advantages of being a person, an organisation entity that's kind of getting in at the front end. We've got a chance to influence some of this thing, and so it could potentially, I don't know where it would end up, but at least we could put that example through and get that considered as part of the process.
Yeah, Councillor Scola.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure process here because I did look at the report and give a significant amount of feedback to staff, and I've got lots of those answers in an email, but that doesn't then get shared, so it's not in the paper, and I think it was talking about risk, financial commitment and comms and engagement, so I'm going to wing it and just ask a few covering questions that hopefully will provide that information. But and I might go back after to say what process would be better to follow to make sure that the questions actually do come out for public, because I think they're quite important. But I'm just going to start with, as I raised, there is no risk analysis in the paper that we saw, and it's a new IT system which it's called IT heavy. It's something that's been considered, but there's a financial contribution required. It's going to be doing something new that we are, yes, looking at a Canadian best practice example, but just on the a couple of things. So if we do commit here and then it doesn't proceed for different reasons, and we know we haven't done the analysis through our census data, how many are likely to pick it up in Tauranga, but can I just confirm, so if it doesn't proceed, there's already 800,000 spent across New Zealand, we've already contributed 100,000 of that, and that if it doesn't proceed post this approval, it's a $500,000 write-off for Tauranga City Council, is that correct? That's correct. Okay, thank you. And so the other thing I did in terms of those risks that I set out, and I did share that with the team, there were a number of those, but Paul, you wrote that management are comfortable that the risks have been identified and steps have been taken to mitigate these. So based on all of those risks that the paper identified and I have asked about, can you just say you are still suggesting that based on those risks, the opportunity is still that we should be proceeding, please?
Yeah, it's obviously for council to make the decision, but the risks have been mitigated to the extent that they can be at this part of the project, and will continue to be monitored as it goes forth. There is always going to be the risk that if the scheme doesn't materialise and succeed, that the 100,000 and the 500,000 would be a write-off. That is a risk that remains. As Fraser mentioned, that is mitigated to some extent, is that it will require the sign-up of other councils to form the $2.5 million required to move to the next step, which will give it more more chance of success to go forward. And we wouldn't release our 500,000 before that funding stack is complete. So that we've done the best level of mitigation that we can, we believe, to in terms of that succeeding. In answer to your question about the take-up rate, I think it's fair to say that some of these things aren't in existence now. Rates postponement obviously is. It's offered through two banks at a relatively expensive rate, and some councils offer it, again, administratively heavy, and has not had significantly take up because they're quite frankly expensive and hard to do at the moment. The best modelling we've got is the British Columbia example, which is a similar size to New Zealand in terms of population, and the uptake of that is mentioned in the report and has been quite successful in terms of that uptake. But we don't have specific modelling here. We have also had some conversations with TECT and Grey Power through other potential schemes around this, and there's been strong indication of support through that as well over the last year or two.
I just suggest, I guess, as part of your question, Councillor Schooler, is we table the reply from Paul. If we just table that reply, and then that puts it out into the public and can see all that information. So I'll get Claire to do that, and then that will become part of the public record.
So thank you for that, and I think, yeah, that's a great way of doing it. So just, I mean, I think I'm really positive that we're looking for new ways or financing tools for our people. So I just realise it's quite a big scheme. So we did hear We had a little bit of conversation from the Mayor at one of our consultation meetings about this, not anything specific, and it was actually, we got a little bit of a negative feedback on it. I just wonder from an engagement perspective, have we done any engagement to know that we've got a certain number of people that actually will find this the right thing for them and their situations in Tauranga?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's fair to say that we haven't done specific communication and engagement planning around this particular product just because of where we are in the phase of the project. Like I said, there was some work done with TECT and Ratepayer in terms of, and that had indicated that there was strong support through those entities for this type of scheme. That was looking at a localised one at the time. But that's the only market testing per se that we've got. There's just some anecdotal information from them. A full communication and engagement plan would need to be part of this in terms of what the product is, because it really is a product of choice for people, and that's part of what would be the Fraser.
I was just going to add, I think it's in one of the reports also, in terms of the development contributions deferral, I think there was some information there that there's Auckland have done a bit of work on that, and there seems to be quite a high pent-up demand for some of that, particularly in terms of individual owners and subdividing their sections. So there does also seem to be some stuff around that. I also understand, particularly around the pills side of things, there's real interest and from government and particularly around Wellington and things like that, because they see some of this earthquake strengthening and things like that might be something that could really take off through that scheme.
Councillor Crowther.
My understanding is that Tauranga City Council has been criticised in some quarters for having one of the hardest to access rates postponement schemes. I'm just wondering if, presumably the whole key point behind all this is to enable a credit facility that's more affordable for people who really need it, and not to open it up for every person and their dog, so to speak, to just use it as some cheap financing when they don't really need it. So that tension is always there. So when TCC came up with what I understand from the critics is that you need to be turned down for a reverse equity option, to go on the market and try to get that. And if you're declined, then you can apply for a rates postponement. How did you weigh up that? And did you think there would be too big a demand? Is that why you put the policy? And I don't know who the you is, but the council. Is that why the council of the time put that policy in with quite a barrier there, so that it wouldn't be overwhelmed by people?
Yeah, Jim's down the back and might be able to add further, but if I just start with, I'd say the big difference between this scheme and what we're talking about there is this scheme keeps our income whole. The issue on the other schemes is that our income doesn't remain whole, in that if we don't collect the number of rates, then other people actually have to. That's the big difference with this, is that it gives a choice for people to take something and still keep our income base whole. I know Jim might want to add some further.
Yeah, with regard to the rates postponement policy, it was modelled on the policies that other metros like Wellington, Hamilton, Auckland had at that time. And it was in the council at the time, and it was the previous 2 or 3 councils have discussed this at length. It was around the reverse mortgage type of market financial assistance wasn't council's core business, and therefore we didn't want to hold that demand on our balance sheet because it was a financial transaction rather than a council core business. But that obviously is a choice that you can make at any time. And
just to add to that, obviously our issue is also that a successful scheme in our own right puts more pressure on our balance sheet because it sits as debt, and we have high debt. So yeah.
Mentioning that, like one of the risks that is in this paper that one of the late papers we got, is saying that there is still a possibility, even though part of the point of this presumably is to get it off balance sheet, that's not necessarily guaranteed. and having read up around some of the commentary from government of the day around waters and around other off-balance sheet, like IFFA, etc., you know, to me, there's some pretty fine lines there. Are you able to comment in terms of, you know, when you compare it to IFFA and other initiatives, is this one, would you assess this as being almost certain to be compliant with being off balance sheet, or is this risk a genuine risk that it may not be in the end?
Always difficult to say with certainty. There is some risk there, but I think it is low based on the work that's been done around the sector. You know, what the fundamental thing that will take something off balance sheet will be in the event that there's no recourse back to council in the event of default. And in this case, the default risk would sit with the Ratepayer Assistance Scheme, as we would effectively receive our rates up front. I would make the comment, though, that Standard & Poor's has indicated that there won't be, you know, they won't always look through, they will start to look through off-balance sheet more and more the more we get. So there is still some credit risk that sits there with off-balance sheet schemes. I think the numbers we're talking here would be, I think we'd be talking a great almost success rate to actually be a risk rate, if that makes sense, to actually get to the point that they would be, with this particular scheme, that it would impact on a rating conversation. It would need to be a lot of uptake. Yeah.
Yep, Councillor Couret.
So if there was a strong uptake by the developers and property investors, etc., and that quantum was very large, is there potential for there to be the fund to be oversubscribed, and therefore those who need it most, the genuine homeowner who can't pay their rates, could be denied assistance? Or is it limitless?
I mean, nothing's limitless, but I would be very surprised, you know, in terms of if I cannot see it being oversubscribed. It's like kind of say we can't borrow, you know. It's creating a commercial return as long as it's for the people who are doing the lending, as long as as long as they are getting that commercial return, then I would suggest that they're willing to keep providing the funding.
I can follow up on that. But from recent experience, when we saw an abundance of cheap money post-COVID, that had a huge influence in terms of people spending, which resulted in high inflation for a period there before it was reined in. So potentially, well, this obviously is inflationary if it's that cheap money is utilised to do stuff, you know, that wouldn't otherwise be. So I personally think, is it something that can be considered further on there? Like consult with the development community, say, look, are you guys going to inundate us with applications, and should we take that into account? Because it's my understanding there's been limited engagement, and that's certainly something that I'd like to cover off, do some targeted consultation around these, you know, just to get an idea of what we're talking about here before leaping in to the next step. And as there's no hurry, would that be quite a viable option, just to go out there, do some targeted consultation?
Yeah, we've already started to put some of that in place around the development contributions. So what we've actually done is identify a couple of the large developers in Tauranga and put them in contact back with Cameron and Partners. So then hopefully over the quite recent time, we'll get some feedback from some of those big developers and see what their interest is in this scheme. Also, as I say, the biggest part that Auckland identified was actually the small landowners, you know, the mums and dads who have a larger section that could take advantage of that through the use of this scheme. But yes, we are looking specifically at some of those large developers around Tauranga and seeing if there is any, you know, what the interest is.
Just to be clear on development contributions, if that's what you're worried about, is that has to be paid off effectively as a rate per year. It's not that you just park it on the property and it stays there forever. It becomes a levy every year to pay that off. And so I think, you know, when you're talking about cheap money, you're really talking about for $4,000 a year, which is the rates component. And I think if people are going to mess around for $4,000 a year to get cheap money, it's not going to have the impact that you think it is on residential property developers. I also notice on residential property developers, they're generally highly leveraged, which means that they won't actually be able to partake in this scheme. So if you're leveraged over 70%, you won't be able to partake in this. Yeah.
But I was more focused on property investment and the potential impact on housing. So potentially, you know, a property investor that has, say, 10 residential properties could think, oh, well, I'll use cheap money, you know, and get every dwelling into the scheme, which frees up capital at the end of the day to further invest. And it's just, my concern is the impact on housing.
Hard to comment at this stage. Again, that will depend on what's there, but most of them are property improvement loans. So it's actually doing things like making the properties more resilient to either earthquakes or floods, adding, you know, solar power and things like that. So it is actually also improving the property. So your housing stock is actually getting better and more livable. So that has benefits the other way as well. I think what the money can be spent on may be fairly well prescribed.
Sorry to labour this, but so perhaps the property council might be a target in terms of consultation to say, hey, what do you guys think with your members? Would they all leap onto it and potentially oversubscribe? Not that that's an issue, I hear, but just in case.
Councillor Crowther.
Can you clarify, apart from the interest rate, which will be cheaper, fundamentally what is the difference from a developer's point of view in terms of if the IFFA was used for a large subdivision, something like a greenfield subdivision? Because at the end of the day, my understanding is in both cases, there'll be somebody in a house where the property will be billed an extra, you know, X thousand dollars per year. Now that will make it X minus, you know, 1% interest. But I guess I'm trying to understand, are there other fundamental differences? I know there is from the back end, if you like, but from the front end where people sort of see the impact on property prices and you know, payments.
Yeah. The Mayor has already mentioned about the fact that they may not be able to access it due to leveraging, but on the basis that they can, the biggest aspect for the developer would be the cash flow advantage. So in other words, they're not having to necessarily pay the money until either it then goes on to a scheme that gets paid off over a long period of time, or it gets, when the house is actually sold to a property owner, it can be extinguished at that point. So it's, you know, in terms of property developers, they're often running relatively short in terms of cash, and so being able to delay that payment until they're actually selling the property could be something that can be considered quite attractive over and top of the interest rate saving.
Okay.
I think the difference is an IFF would effectively fund the building the infrastructure. A RAS would not do that. You've got to have a title to be able to get a RAS, and therefore, you know, when you sell that, you have to pay the RAS back. So,
isn't that just like another configuration of the same thing? Like one way or the other, there needs to be some money, some capital to invest.
Well, they're similar, but they're used for different.
By council or by a developer.
If you're putting the infrastructure in the ground to open a subdivision, you fund it through an IFF. If you have a property where you're paying development contributions or whatever, then you can use the RAS system. But they're different purposes, but they're similar outcomes.
I guess my question is probably really with the new development levy regime, where will the IFFA fit under that regime is probably the core question.
Well, the same place as it fits right now. So, what's that?
Just my understanding was one of the reasons for changing that was because the IFFA wasn't being picked up on.
Yeah, because it's clunky and it's hard to implement, but that's what the government are looking to change to make that easier. But they're completely different scales. You can't do a Te Timu with a RAS. So yeah. So they're completely different products, but similar outcomes is ultimately. But one's a lot cheaper than the other. So, any other questions?
Just one in terms of, and I'm looking at the recommendation. B is there's no date on it to say yes, we would approve that funding, provided other funding was coming from somewhere else, and on the basis that we were referred to a report from November 2023 when we got this paper. I just wonder if we should be thinking about a date in there, because we don't want this just to be an ongoing forever money being put there. Is that sensible?
I just check. It is included in the annual plan year, so the money would effectively be for the 25-26 year. If you wanted a further date in there, we can.
I'd just like a date in there. Yes, please. You need to decide what it is.
By the 30th of June 2000.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, do you know if there have been discussions, like part of what's been talked about in the past with these kind of schemes is to package them with other social or now it seems environmental outcomes that are being looked at. So we've talked about potential property improvements which could have some small environmental benefits and some social benefits, but what about things like accessibility to the scheme from a development point of view being contingent upon affordable housing, or having access to the scheme to help deliver packages like partnership with government to deliver packages around home help requirements, which is sort of a gap, like basically ageing in place is a big issue for the country, costing the government heaps of money. So one of the big challenges is how to actually finance that. If someone owns their house, can't afford extra help, but the system at the moment is obviously strained to the bit. So it's like, have those discussions taken place? Because I'm aware they have amongst councils, individual councils, but have they in regards to this scheme?
They certainly have been within councils, and the interest of ECA is probably supportive, effectively, of the desire to actually allow those property improvement loans for various elements going forward. Again, it comes back to like being early in will give us the opportunity to actually have more influence effectively on that criteria going forward as to what that might be. And as Fraser said, each element is optional for the council to opt into anyway. So we may, we don't have to adopt property improvement loans, for example. And keeping that balance in terms of the local government versus central government responsibility that sits within that space as well, I think is important.
Councillor Rolleston.
Thank you. It's probably more good to see you again, Fraser and Jim, bringing back memories again. So it's probably more question for Jim around, the potential uptake. You've got a team that's on the ground day to day, dealing with our ratepayers, and I think we've got something like 5,500 of them are applying for the rates rebate scheme. And I mean, my read on this, it's pitched at a certain group generally that are relatively high rates and generally low incomes, and that's a relatively, I would think, a reasonable chunk of people within the Tauranga city, given our demographic, our high value land, etc. So I guess my question, Jim, is around, on the ground, as you know, I've obviously had experience at that pointy end, that these people are receiving these rates bills, getting them maybe a little bit from the central government for rate rebate. What's your sort of feel around how this might appease a number of people based on being on the ground?
So this would just be an opinion rather than anything based on any surveys that we've done at this level, but definitely the 5,500 people that currently apply for and get a rebate need it. And we've been feeding back to the DIA for some years that the scheme wasn't fit for purpose because some people, you remember Jesse James and his wife, whose only income was superannuation, were unable to access the rates rebate scheme, but they are now with the new government decision. So we should get another 1,000 or so people that may be eligible for the rates rebate. But the rates rebate pays for up $800 of the rates. So I would expect a number of people that are on the rates rebate scheme would want to look at this if there was a way of paying your rates and having the longer term growth of your property without any pressure of having to change your property. So it seems to me that people at the high asset value and low income flow would look at this scheme as a beneficiary one, but obviously it would probably need to be proven throughout New Zealand so that people see that as, like they did with KiwiSaver, seeing as a scheme that's worthwhile using at a certain time of life. It's just an opinion, though.
Yeah, I mean, a potential proxy is to look at those on the rates rebate, and you've got the valuations. You can, I mean, it's a pretty crude way of doing it, but you don't know what equity they've got and the like in it, but you definitely know they're on the low income. That's because they got the rate rebate. And if they've got these relatively high values, I would have thought they would be ideal, given what we know. But that, that's just an indicator, a more a thought rather than something definite.
Yeah, and certainly the feedback from the collection side of rates, we're up at 99%, so we do get our rates in. But a lot of people, they're finding it tough to meet the rates payments, even though they believe that they should meet them and that they want to see the city do what it's doing. But it's just that fine. It's really the cash flow for quite a lot of the community, and this may be a tool that can help for cash flow for just not.
All right, Councillor Crowther.
I'm wondering what the thinking is behind our quite significant contribution as a percentage of the total. With 3% of the country's population, and we're putting in 20% of the next capital injection under this proposal, and it just seems part of my concern around this is how much support it will get from central government, particularly probably ACT and maybe other coalition partners, but also the councils around the country, including those who have what they're sort of describing as, their rates schemes are fine at the moment, according to some of them. So why the sort of big discrepancy between sort of our size and our own base, ratepayer base, and then sticking in a big amount of capital?
Probably the analogy I would draw was when the LGFA was established, was a similar startup model of a smaller number of councils, which has grown. This has been an initiative taken by largely the growth councils for 4 or 5 years, and you raise there is a risk point in terms of take up of those, which I guess was the same with the LGFA, which is why it needs a certain establishment volume to be able to actually be feasible to get going, which is part of what the business case has established. So it would be very, very difficult to start with all councils and get a contribution. This is starting being led by the growth councils to take it.
The only other comment I'd make Yeah, it's a good question, but the other side of things, the higher proportion you own at this stage is the more influence you have on the rules that are going to be developed.
And the ability for return after the shareholder return too.
There's also a suggestion, I think, in one of the handouts that some of the early investment might be treated more favourably in terms of 2 shares for every dollar as opposed to 1 share, for example. So there is potentially an investment opportunity as well through that.
So how much did Auckland put in? Committed?
The same, yeah. But it's the max because you can't have any one, proportionally, in theory, you'd say they would do more, but you don't want to have any one organisation owning more than 20%, because that would impact how they might have to show it in their accounts and in terms of we're talking off balance sheet and things like that. So that's a safe cut-off in terms of that's been identified through that.
Right, any further questions? If there's no further questions, I'm happy to move the recommendations. I think we've got a slight change to just having a date in there. Councillor Taylor will second that. So this is another tool in the toolbox. It's not compulsory, it's an option. I think it's a great option to give our people. I think this is something that I've heard discussion about, just finding ways to allow people to have options. Look, we're getting in early. There is risks around that. This is an investment, and I very much support this scheme. I think it has a lot of benefits, a lot of things that people have been crying out for, and it's a good solution because it's relatively cheap and delivers a good outcome for our ratepayers. I think it's very misunderstood at the moment as to what it is, and that's a job for us to, as this goes on, is educate our people. But as I said, you've got risks investing early, but you also have rewards. And if this comes off as predicted to, I guess that's the risk reward. Then this will be a very successful outcome for the city, knowing that there is a risk that nothing happens and we lose $500,000. And ultimately, that's our job as council. This is probably a world that I came from before here is investing and understanding those risks and rewards. And I think on balance, this is a very good scheme, and it shows some really positive results for our people overall. Yes, we've heard some of the conversation about residential investors and developers and all that sort of thing. And yes, it could be used that way. But again, if we've got a seat at the table, we can help design the system early so that we ensure that it is used for the purposes that we want. I just don't think those kind of people, residential investors and developers are going to muck around, playing around for 1% saving on your rates bill. It's probably just not worth the time that is, but it does offer a really valuable tool to those that really need it and do need assistance, and it gives them more options. For example, if you live in a very highly valued home that you bought 20 years ago, without this scheme, your only option may be that you have to move and sell that property. This, you can make a choice that I'm going to use some of that capital to fund my rates bill and allow me to live in that home for longer. So, I think there's some real upsides, and there's a I think we should be there sitting at the table and helping design the system, because I think ultimately it's going to be a good result for our people and also for the council from a financial perspective. So that's my view. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. The other thing I'd point out, this has been worked on for a while. It's gone a lot of detail. We've got a lot of detail in front of us. We have some questions, obviously, about where it's heading. But I think the point is it's not something that's just been made up on the spot. It has been worked on by some pretty high-powered people. So supportive of it, and mainly for the reason that it does give relief to those that, you know, if they're looking at having to move house because they can't afford their rates bill, this is an ideal solution which allows them an option to remain where they are and get the funding at a reasonable price. So very supportive. I think it's a great idea. Yeah.
Councillor Scholar.
Thank you, and I think I definitely acknowledge it is an extra tool for those who are, and I'm talking about the from the rates perspective, that are struggling with rates. I just think that we are, as I've said before, that I think we need to be very aware of the risks involved, and also I'm not 100% convinced that we should be at 20% as well, but that's probably a lesser issue for me. I think I'm happier with the risk analysis that we have been provided by staff yesterday, so that covers off some of those. I think one thing I would like to note is, and it's probably a question to us around the table, is I wouldn't like this to influence the affordability conversation, and we have heard that our rates aren't affordable, and we have committed to making better decisions to make better value for money for the rates that we get in. I've heard it's relatively cheap and this is an ideal solution from two colleagues. Some might say a more ideal solution is that we actually make rates affordable, so you don't have to do this. So I'm just putting it out there that to me we need to be careful that we don't utilise this tool to say it is affordable because you've got an option that you don't actually have to pay your rates. And I don't want to be in that situation. I'm reasonably confident that we won't, but this is something that's going to be on future councils as well. So to me, that's just something we need to really think about. Thank you in terms of adding the date on B. I think, and Paul, you noted it in your response, that we don't say where the funding's coming from, and that you suggested we note in E that we say that where the funding's coming from, but we do that in B as well? If I could suggest foreshadowing an amendment to B to say approve the funding from the 25-26 annual plan?
Through the Chair, I can suggest approve funding as loan funded expenditure in the 25-26 financial year. So if we add the words, approves 500,000 loan funded expenditure.
In the 25-26 financial year, yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I don't. Right, any other discussion? Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, I support the principle of this in terms of rates postponement. I think the Deputy Mayor made a good point that it cannot be conflated with affordability issues, and it is one tool to help some people, and as Councillor Rolleston said, there's probably a target market there that you could predict, I would think. And as Jim had mentioned, that it'd be interesting to see the uptake of the changes that the government made recently to the rates rebate, because that could also have quite a significant impact. I guess I look at the most needy people in our city, from what I see, are people renting, and I think it's a very moot point about, in fact, there's evidence to suggest that the benefits of this would not be passed on to renters, even if the people owning the properties availed themselves of this, because it is still a debt, it still has interest, and I think you wouldn't expect most people to sort of altruistically let the tenants just pay the interest on it and then end up with a debt. So I don't think it's going to hit the people who are most needy in this city. I have concerns around the property investment, the improvements side of it. And I think, ironically, there's probably less market failure in that area than almost any area that I can think of in terms of environmental outcomes. Yes, we should completely change the ETS in New Zealand, all sorts of wonderful things we could do, but the one area that's actually been quite good is the banks, the Australian banks, actually not the New Zealand bank, have been good at actually supporting people to improve their properties to get environmental and social benefits. So we're kind of finding a solution for something where there isn't a problem, in my view, given that low-income people have been subsidised to do those for many, many years. In terms of the development side of it, I'd have to see more before I could support that. I guess having looked at all the information we've got ECA putting in 400, Auckland 500, that means 1,600 required. I'd rather us put in less. So I'd struggle to vote for this at 500. I think, personally, I'd rather put in less, and if we've got the money sitting in the plan, there are some safety improvements on some roads that I know of that I would rather do with that money. And I would rather, yes, we might miss out on some benefits, but the whole point of this is to get social outcomes. It's not to make a profit, in my view. So there is a risk, and I would say let's spread it. We've heard that Hamilton, Queenstown Lakes and Hutt are in the same position as ourselves, being asked to make a decision. Well, that alone would mean it could be 400 each. If Wellington and New Plymouth, who are next on the list, if they were included, that would get it down to the 300, or less. And then if presumably Christchurch is an obvious one and Selwyn is an obvious one, being a growth area. So it seems to me like 200 from each of those, and you get about 8 councils there, as well as the big guy Auckland. That would give me some confidence, and it would also de-risk it until we actually would still be part of the early conversations. We had a similar number of people when setting up LGFA, is my understanding of the history. It just shows out of 67 councils, we'd have 8 would be brought into it, and ECA. So to me, that would be a far better way of doing it. So I'd like to propose an amendment to that and approve up to $250,000 loan-funded expenditure.
Councillor, correct. His second is? Yeah.
So I think I've sort of outlined my thinking on it, and I guess, sure, we might lose out a little bit in terms of if there was a windfall at the end of the day, but we would still be in with a significant amount of money. I don't think we should do it to make a big amount of money gain on it. We should be doing this to get the right size investment to put us in a good position. We've got 3% of the country's population. We're still putting in a much bigger share. Effectively, we're kind of doing it on behalf of the Bay and Gisborne and a number of other councils who won't be there. So that looks to me like it'd be a far better risk ratio.
Councillor Correct, do you want to talk to the amendment? Look, I disagree with this. If you're investing, you want to have a seat at the table. You want to be a partner that shapes this. We've heard a lot of discussion around the table, and quite frankly, at 250 grand, we'll be sitting on the sidelines watching everyone else decide for us how the rates assistance scheme work. We heard directly from the people that are doing this. They want to start with 5 or 6 partners. That requires a $500,000 investment. you know, at the end of the day, do our ratepayers want to be paying profit to someone else, or do they want to be paying profit to their own council, and we're profiting from other councils that are using this scheme? That's investing 101 to me. You know, like it's, yes, it is a lot of money, but on the other side, it's not a lot of money, you know, in the scheme of this, and I believe that we go 500 and we have a significant influence in designing the system so it works for us, it works for our people, you know, rather than you know, just half-assed going into this and effectively sitting there watching others design a system that we're not necessarily happy with. So that's my 2 cents. Yep.
Sorry, can I ask you a question on that? So just in terms of what does our involvement mean, and is that FTEs that we are also putting into the scheme from a cost perspective? How do we get involved, and if we're involved in the intricacies of what the system offers and how it delivers, that's not something we have considered. Is that an additional thing we need to be considering?
It's in the report. You know, there's another seat at the table as the shareholder council, which will be effectively designing the system, and you know, at 200. Well, potentially we would have to offer, if we want to be involved in designing the system, we've got to offer people that you know, that are sitting at the table. As Paul has mentioned, he has been part of this in you know, understanding it from a shareholder perspective and from a council perspective. So yes, we would have to invest you know, people to enable that to happen.
So just on that, can we just ask that any future recommendations, if this goes through, do include the potential cost at an FTE perspective of any people that we're actually having around the table? Because that's actually quite significant, again, in regard to our intention that we are making sure we're not having more people doing more things and just really managing the personnel costs for TCC.
Thanks, Mayor. No, I do not support this amendment. I'd like to echo the words of the Mayor. I support the original B recommendation. A lot of the concerns I've heard raised today would be addressed by us as the majority shareholder sitting at the table. Will be able to dictate the rules and the means by which people can access this fund. It is primarily aimed at homeowners with high equity in their home, so they can access that equity to help support them in their house and stay in place longer, as Councillor Crowther has suggested. This is aimed at supporting a proportion of the Tauranga homeowner to keep them in their home and allow them to access what is their money, their equity in their home, to pay their rates and possibly conduct healthy home improvements to their home in order to reduce the heating costs. It's hopefully to improve their life and make their later years more comfortable. I'm fairly confident that we could make it unattractive to people who wish to take advantage of it.
Right, any other discussion around the amendment? If not, I'll now put the amendment to the council and ask all those in favour. Those against? That is lost. So now we go back to the substantive, and is there any other discussion we'd like to have on that? Yep, Councillor Curran.
The scheme certainly has merit because it does save money to those wishing to look at reverse mortgage type offerings, which would help ultimately the family of the end of the day if it was the elderly, because there'll be more left in terms of the value left in the property, so that's always an advantage. My concern, as I've sort of mentioned before, is around the unintended consequences, and a bit closer to the mic.
Yep.
That's better, isn't it? So yeah, it's around unintended consequences. It can be distortionary, and what immediately came to mind when I thought about it was the impact of the housing supplement that central government offers to basically prop up property investors, because it allows those rents to be higher than they otherwise would be, and it doesn't provide the benefit, it doesn't result in delivering the aim or objective of the housing supplement, and it increases property prices because landlords know that they can pay a little bit more than otherwise would. So when they're bidding for a property against first home buyers, that they can drive up the price. So yeah, that's why what immediately triggered my concerns around this. Also, the issue raised by the Deputy Mayor about potentially, we don't want to perpetuate the unsustainable rate increases that we're experiencing and we will be experiencing through the remainder of our 10-year plan. So definitely we need to take that outside of the discussion when we talk about rate increases. We want to maintain a strong emphasis on delivering value for money for our ratepayers. But that aside, there's some genuine merit in this and provide definite advantages to those who are in the situation. And I'm hoping it will only be to bona fide people, bona fide homeowners that have a problem paying the rates. And some of those will be some of those people that are on the pension and can't afford to pay a $10,000 rate bill. And particularly looking forward, in our 10-year plan, rates are going to double in the next 8 years or so. And so those people are being in even more need of such a tool to help them. So while, fundamentally there's a bit of opposition from my perspective, I will support it going forward. I'd like to see a bit more engagement with the, say, the Property Council and trying to minimise or identify what issues might arise. So when we're at the table talking about the criteria, which I think is pretty critical, that we try and focus in on those with the most need and not cause those unintended consequences. So happy to, well, not happy, but I will support it, and let's hope we get an outcome that we really are seeking and benefit the community.
Councillor Rolleston.
Thank you. Yes, probably endorse a lot of the comments and making clear that we decouple this from rates affordability, and reinforcing from, and putting it on there that I have been the rates manager and the revenue manager, and so I know it's been a while, but the situation of Tauranga and the ever-growing high-value properties, which is not necessarily, depending on which way you look at it, is not necessarily a bad thing. It's showing that people want to come to Tauranga, and it's creating challenges. So I endorse the Mayor's comments. It's one tool in our toolbox, probably aligned to a certain group of ratepayers where I think there will be a number, whether they take it up or not. But it's still those at the really tough end that are generally struggling. I know it's not council's full job to solve those challenges. It's probably not going to do a lot in terms of specific Māori land and Māori ratepayers, but I understand we've got good processes in that, because we won't be able to probably do anything on Māori land because of their inability to sell it anyway, so it wouldn't fit in that scheme. But I endorse the comments. We need a number of tools in our toolboxes, and this is one of them. And my knowledge of Tauranga is that it's something that's probably necessary.
Okay, any other discussion? I'll just wrap up briefly. I think some really good points made, and especially around affordability. I think that's, this is not, it's not we can put the rates up anywhere we want to and the RAS will look after it. That's still a key key part of affordability. However, I do acknowledge that probably there is a lot of people already right now struggling that no matter if there's rates rises or not, would actually use this scheme today. And we've heard, there's 5,500 people in Tauranga that are getting the rates rebate, which suggests there is a need right now to do this, let alone with any further rates rises that are proposed. So, I think they are two separate issues: affordability and the RAS. Affordability is something that we are determined to do, and the RAS is able to help out our people if people choose to use it. But it's only a tool in the toolbox, and there's no compulsion to use it. So I think it's a positive for our people if this comes off. So now I'll put that to the council and ask all those in favour. Those against? Councillor Crowther. Thank you. That is carried. Now we move on to 11.3, Annual Plan Rates Impact Update Post-Deliberations. This is on page 64. This is after our deliberations, just coming back to work out the numbers and showing us what impact some of those decisions had, what 9.9 average rates increase does to the different ratepayers and the percentages that the medians in each of the categories, as well as the lower quartiles and upper quartiles will pay. So it sort of shows what those decisions have meant to our ratepayers. So obviously, Jim, I'm not sure if you... is this... Sorry, we've got Catherine and Tracy. I'm sure there might be some questions for you as well, Jim. So welcome. I'm not sure if you want to introduce it or you just want to open up for questions.
Overall, we're happy to open up for questions. I just would note that we did list on the second page the various deliberation decisions, and I haven't mentioned in the report, but as a result of those decisions, the capital has actually moved up to 502 million from the 498, because there were decisions associated with bringing forward the connecting Mount Maunganui, moving badminton potentially into the equity space. It moved on to the balance sheet, and some in the Mount College pool is loan-funded OPEX, but we do still report those loan-funded OPEX projects through that total, what we call capital plus OPEX. So that gets you to that new total of 502. So just thought you'll see that when we bring the full financials, the full annual plan for adoption, you'll see all that material, but I just thought I'd call out that you will see the 502 as a result of those decisions instead of the 498. And the other, so just a minor wording thing which I will call out, is the Papamoa Shared Pathway. I've identified it as bringing forward construction, which it is doing. Obviously we have had applied for consents, but it did not have actually a specific Papamoa Stage 2 walkway budget in the LTP. It was combined with other matters. So you'll look at that in more detail in July, but I just thought I'd call that out now as well, just so that there's clarity on that.
Thank you. That's very useful. Have we got any questions? I'm just interested in the commercial and the reasoning that they have increased. Like they're quite a lot above industrial, yet industrial lost a number of units, etc. So just how that impact has kind of played out.
It's a combination of a couple of things that have been happening. One of them is the increase in the percent that the overall commercial sector pays, increasing the differential to 2.25 from where it was kept at 2.1, just because of the cost of living crisis. So that's one part. The other part is a recurring theme about central government looking for reduction in their operational costs by looking at properties that are commercial properties leased by government agencies like the DHB, where they can then request and we have to provide non-rateable status for those commercial properties. So they've fallen out of the total pool, if you like, the base, and that has meant that the spreads around all the other properties are a little bit higher than it would if we didn't lose that amount of base from the calculation. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, that's a good explanation, thank you. Just a supplementary to that, have we considered asking government to contribute for some of their properties as to the equivalent of what they would pay in rates? Because it seems like our ratepayer subsidising all government property is not that efficient to our ratepayer.
It's fair to say it's a constant theme in local government that for the 20 years I've been here, we've been asking central government to look at contributions, and to date we haven't been successful in that argument.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for staff? Yeah, Councillor Crowther.
In order to keep the similar ratio to what was initially envisaged with the commercial industrial, in terms of the similar percentage increases, what would the ratios have to be? Would we be talking about something like 14.6% share for commercial and 19.4% for industrial, or did you have anything that you could guide us through that? Because it strikes me, I guess the reason for asking is it strikes me we made that assessment of where those numbers should be as opposed to the differential itself and work backwards to get a differential. I'm thinking now that we see the results of it, do we want to consider reversing that instead of saying, well, let's have another stab at this?
You did have that option in the earlier papers during the year to look at whether that was something you wanted to do, and you could do that again in future annual plans or long-term plans if you saw the merit in that argument.
Supplementary, I guess what we consulted on, my understanding is that there have been changes since what we consulted on, right? Given like what you said in terms of some government properties, etc., which have tweaked. When I look back at those numbers, they have changed, and I think hence the Mayor's question. So if we want to align it more with what our intention was, would we have to consult again? Is that what you're suggesting?
So the decision on the differential that's going to apply, which is what this is now coming out of, has been consulted on and has been decided. So, this is the mathematics of now how it's aligning with the work that Jim has done on what that database is now saying. So you would need a separate decision process to change that. So
if I can just be probably overly explicit, but we're saying the key point in the consultation is not the rates increases, it's not the actual numbers, but it's the differential itself is the key, because there are differences in all three of those. Two of those have changed, and the differential has stayed the same. Are you saying the differential is the one thing that we'd have to consult on if we change that?
No, you haven't. You didn't consult on a differential. You consulted on a policy, the long-term plan policy, which you decided that you would leave in place for the moment, which was to move towards a proportional category payment of the general rate. And the reasons for changes happen every year. Every year it could be different. It can be a revaluation. It can be a number of things that affect the base, and this is normal every year, really, to an extent. But when we look at the predicted estimates in January, then there is still 6 months of new maintenance work, new subdivisions that may or may not come through in time for the base, and in this case some remission policies. So the decision on the methodology is one that you've made for this year's annual plan after deliberations, and you can revisit that in future years if that's what you wish.
So I'm sorry, just to be clear, so the differential is a calculated number? That's
correct. The differential falls out of the budget and the decision on the
so
proportional.
effectively what's driving the difference is that 66, 14.8 and 19.2%. Is that what drives?
The difference from what you may have seen before is the base. The base might have changed a little bit. I'm not seeing where it's changed much. Glenn, Councillor Crowther, can you explain where you think the changes have happened?
I was comparing it to what we were emailing about offline, actually, which was the last meeting before the consultation. And the numbers, as we know, changed in two ways. And for anyone watching this, one way was because this is actually based around a 10.4% rates increase, which is the pre-growth number. So that after allowing for growth, it goes to 9.9. The previous information we had when we made our decision around the differential, well, effectively around the differential, but around the ratio, that was when we were given information with 9.9% as though that was the pre-growth. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but that's my understanding. So we made a decision based on information that wasn't like for like here. So hence, when you look at that, those numbers change a bit, yeah.
You're right. The information from January was a 10% budget increase, but that was just 10% on the budget, which is effectively a 9.5% on existing ratepayers after growth, because the 0.5% of growth on new ratepayers, and there's new expenditure related to the new growth as well. So you are correct. Comparing the one in January at 10% with the existing one, they are different numbers.
And I think it was the March one was probably the key as well, yeah.
So I think just to summarise that question, I think what Councillor Crowther was asking is there an ability, for example, to make the commercial and the industrial median more similar by shifting those numbers? You know, he talked 14.6 and 19.4. Does that require a bigger process?
It doesn't require reconsultation, but you would have to revisit the decision you made in the last council meeting, and then that would push out the timeline of the rates resolution and providing the rates to the solicitors for the new year. It would create a number of knock-on effects if you delayed that process at this point in time.
If I could just add to that, I'm not a standing orders expert, but there are requirements that would actually have to be worked through to change a decision that's been made in a previous meeting.
Cool. All right. Any other questions for staff? Councillor Baker.
It's not rates related if we wanted to sit on this topic first for a bit. Otherwise, happy to move. Carry on.
Yeah.
Okay. Section 9, page 65 of the report. We've just got some of the really cool community facilities in kaupapa that we've supported. Just wanting clarity on a couple of them because I wasn't sure. So 3 and, those numerals, 3 and 4. Part funding of Portaloos and then the Papamoa Rugby Club relocatable club facility. That's not actually what we supported in the resolution. I recall that we were looking at actually for the Portaloos, just buying Portaloos and providing that service, and then the other one was working with the Papamoa Rugby Club. It's a semantic thing, but I don't want us to look like we're over-promising that something that we actually didn't commit to.
Yes, it might. I guess you can read a few things into it. I've actually copied those from the press release. Yeah.
Well, am I wrong in what I remember? Because if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. No,
we're funding those things from existing budgets, and that's probably part of the directing existing budgets, as I understand it. But Tracy can probably give you the detail of how that flowed through, and I think it probably is interpretation of words. I think we all understand we're making available some assets to netball for a period of time, but we were going to purchase them, yes.
Just for clarity, those particular 2 items had no extra financial impact. Quite a lot of the items through deliberations, the resolutions were to support the intent through either existing budgets or through council resource, rather than giving money.
It's probably just how I'm reading it then. But it says here, community facilities to receive support a Papamoa Rugby Club relocatable clubroom facility, which sounds like a massive investment relative to what we actually committed to. So just conscious of how this might read to others in the public. That's all.
Right, any other questions on that paper? If there's no further questions, if we could just have the resolution put up, please. So this is really just receiving the report and seeing the consequences of some of those decisions and understanding what that does to the different categories of rates. I'm happy to move that. If we've got a Councillor Baker will second. Thank you. I don't think there was any further discussion from my perspective, but Councillor Roseboom.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to make one comment around the differential versus the percentage. At the time that we sort of agreed on this, I was pushing for us to stick to the 2.1, 2.7, and I think everyone here's just realised forcing a percentage of the total rate over our differential has created a problem now where our commercial guys are disadvantaged and agree not being helped by central government. Again, more phone calls to Wellington will be required here to try and get some support from Central Wellington, because what they're effectively doing is giving us another tax that we have to pass on to our commercial industrial ratepayers, because they can't be bothered paying a fair price for the support of the infrastructure that they have access to. But around this, I would definitely like us between now and the next annual plan to decide whether we're going to focus on the percentage or the actual differential, because I think it would definitely support our commercial industry if we could get it back down to 2.1.
Right, any other discussion? Yeah, Councillor Karat.
Probably taking a bit of an opportunity, given that we had a bit of an informal discussion last night, and I'm referring to page 65, paragraph 9, 7, just a commitment to work with Ratepayer Sports Club and Papamoa Tennis Club. My desire in terms of delivering a message to council staff is I personally, I think others would share, that any potential investment, I'm not saying there will be in terms of the builds, Ratepayer Sports Club wants its club rooms and changing room facility, the long-term one there. And I would definitely like to, as council staff, to send the message that, in order to gain ratepayer money or, money from council in support of that build, is that it be a multi-use facility and not a standalone, because, this is something we've talked about years ago, and there's I'm not sure whether there's a policy in place, but sort of steer them in that direction. They've just got a 65k grant, I think, in terms of developing a feasibility study, and they're looking at engaging a consultant. So at this stage, I'm pretty keen that the message for us says that when you engage a consultant, one of the aims is to take a wider approach and develop a multi-use facility that can be shared with other clubs, given firstly the capacity of the park there, to the number of buildings potentially you want to see there, and also the enhanced ability to gain some support from council in terms of some contributions. So if I can just leave it at that, but support the report.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, then I'll put the resolution to the council. Ask all those in favour. Those against? That's carried. Thank you. So we will finish off this, which is our last public item for today, and then we'll have a break. So 11.4, which is membership of the Leading for Delivery subcommittee of the Smart Growth Leadership Group. We got any questions on this?
Just not sure we're putting forward the right person. No, happy to move.
Okay, Councillor Baker, we got a seconder for that. Councillor Schuler, thank you. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, I will ask all those in favour. Those against? And I will abstain, yep. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So that actually finishes our public agenda. Thank you very much. So we might take an early lunch, and we'll come back at 11:50, and we will go into publicly excluded and finish off the meeting there. Yeah. Yeah. Is that easier? Yeah. Okay. All right. Councillor Schooler, Councillor Taylor. Ask all those in favour of going into publicly excluded. Those against? That is carried, thank you. So we are now in publicly excluded, and we will come back at 11:50 to continue the meeting. Thank you.